Hi, this is Cherokee. So I'm continuing my communication series, and this video is going to be on communication in the workplace. So I did a video on how to negotiate your salary. It's important to fully understand how to negotiate your salary before you begin to negotiate how your style of work ethic will go while you're working for any organization. So why is that? When you put into effect the tools that goes into negotiating your salary, and that will be knowing your self-worth, knowing what you bring to the table, and being very clear about who you are and the nature of your relationship with the business entity that you're going into in agreement with, this is your launching or your jumping off point. So, in other words, before I get a job, I am going to study my resume. I am going to know all of the ins and outs of what I have to offer this particular role. I will have done my background research so I know what my salary, what my desired salary is. I will know what my minimum acceptance would be for myself. And all of that goes into shaping who you are as a person. And you're going to need that before we go into the next phase of communication in the workplace, because things can get a little sticky in the workplace. Let's face it. Some challenges that people are faced with is not feeling that they are heard, not having their needs met, not having even perhaps basic supplies that they might need. They might need another computer, they might need other things to do their job more efficiently. Some people accept jobs and they're not really clear on who exactly their bosses are. If you don't even know who your boss are, who your boss is, what is the likelihood that you'll know the full range of your responsibilities? So this is why it's so important that you do that little bit of extra work that goes into negotiating your salary, so that from the beginning, from the door, you are assured of who you are and exactly why you're there. Okay, so that's a lot of that is in the salary negotiation video. This video is going to be about the basics of communicating with your coworkers as well as with your bosses, because it is not uncommon that coworkers and your superiors might place you in compromising positions. And so then what do? You don't want to be accountable for something and then be at risk of jeopardizing your position in the job. And there are all kinds of, I'm going to be honest with you, manipulation tools that people use to pressure you into doing things that you either don't want to do, or legally you shouldn't do, or morally for you personally it may not be right to do. So this video is going to talk about how to handle those particular issues. But again, you want to be very clear on who you are in terms of your salary, because that's going to help you develop your character. Okay, so number one, what is your role in any organization? I don't know if this comes as a shock to anyone, but from a business perspective, it's a business relationship. From an employee perspective, it's more like a frenzy relationship. So there's a misunderstanding right from the door for many people. And because of that misunderstanding on what this relationship actually is to my employer, this is the first issue that I see that trips people up. So what do I mean that this is a business relationship? Whenever you get hired for a job, you are going to sign a lot of paperwork. The paperwork will pertain to taxes and things like that, yes, but you're also going to sign a letter of acceptance. That letter of acceptance is going to have your hours that you've committed to working, how many hours, whether or not there's flexibility within that, what your salary will be, what your full obligation is. That's going to be in writing because it's a contract. You're also going to receive a manual from your employer, an employee handbook it's usually called. in which you are encouraged to read. Not a lot of people read it, but you're encouraged to read it so you can understand the ins and the outs of this business transaction, because that's what it is. What's in your employee handbook? Things that you can do to violate the expectations that might get you fired. Um, Opportunities for working through issues within your specific department or your area of employment, and how you would go about doing that. In other words, following the chain of command. All of those details on how this contract with your employer is supposed to work is outlined in writing. You will be given those things. Now, a lot of people don't read those, but it's in your best interest to read your contract and to understand that the nature of your place in any organization, you're given an employee number for a reason, because you're a number. I hate to say it. You're a number. You're a number, you're easily replaceable, and you want to just understand that this is a business relationship. And that means that each side has a responsibility. Now, of course, you're going into an employer because you want a paycheck, obviously, but you also want to be happy. You're there for the majority of your day. Most of the time, people work 8 or more hours, 8, 12, sometimes 16, sometimes more. So you're there for a huge chunk of your day. So as much as possible, you want it to go as smoothly as possible. And this is where understanding the nature of your relationship, which means having clear boundaries, comes into place. So, when you engage in a business, it is a business transaction. Okay, so now that we've established that your relationship with your employer is a business transaction, we're going to talk about setting boundaries. This is one of the things that I've noticed from working in corporate America. Sometimes they ask you to swipe out or to come in early, but don't swipe in until your allotted time. And we're going to talk about why that's not a good idea and how to be clear on your start time, on your end time, and on your breaks and your job responsibilities. So again, the best time to do this is before you start the job. You ask these questions on the interview. But if you've already been working in a job for a period of time, it doesn't matter. Today's a new day. You can start at any moment, at any time. Get clear on who you are. Get clear on your relationship with the organization that you work for, and get clear on what your boundaries are. The reason you want to get clear on that is, as a business, it is prudent for them to use as much of your energy as possible, and also to make practical business moves that are in their best interest to enable the business to thrive and survive. But it may not be in your best interest. So what does that mean? That means when it's time to make pay cuts or to delete people from the payroll or terminate people, you might be one of the people to go. And how long you've worked there is not a factor. This is not 1953. These old companies do not care anymore how long you've been loyal to the company. Okay? That loyalty thing, it works one way. You are loyal to them, they are not loyal to you. You need to understand that. That's important. Because a lot of people feel loyal. I've been here for 5 years. I've been here for 10 years. I've been here for 15 years. I've been here for 20 years. And you will be fired. You will be fired. No one's going to be like, oh, they've been here for 10 years, 20 years. Sorry. It just doesn't work that way. Now, I do hope that some companies are going to perhaps bring something like that back, but at the end of the day, they are very much focused on money. And the reality is, the longer that you've worked for an organization, number one, the less money you'll be making in the long run, because the economy changes. And so if you move around every 3 to 5 years, or even sooner, that's actually in your best interest. That's for another video. But otherwise, you're in that salary and you get your small little increment raises on a yearly basis. 1-2%, if you're lucky, 3. But those are, I mean, I call them penny raises because the amounts are absolutely ridiculous, and they don't ever match the inflation rate. So that's the reason why it's not the best idea to stay long term. But also, your longevity in the company does not have any meaning for anybody except for you. We are creatures of habit, and because of that, it's important that we have that kind of consistency, and we stay with a company or an organization for a long time. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But if that's what works for you, you don't want to move. Applying for a new job can be, annoying and time consuming, and people don't want to do it, and that's fine. But when you become a little uh, when there's a misunderstanding about what the nature of your relationship is, and then you believe that you're going to last and survive simply because you've been there for a long time, no. It's just no. I can tell you right now, it does not matter. It does not matter how long you've been working for a company. When it comes time to make cuts, um, if your salary is too high, you're getting cut. No one cares about how long you've been working there. Sorry. And you wanna keep that in the back of your mind, because sometimes there is an inkling that terminations will be coming down the pipeline. Take note of that, and don't be scared to branch out and to make moves. Apply somewhere else. Like, why be caught off guard, especially if you hear through the grapevine or you're aware that this might be taking place. Use your own sound judgment on whether you would be a likely person to be let go. But do not think for 1 second that if you've worked for a long time in a company that's you're going to stay, because that's just not their thought process. Their thought process is to run a list of salaries and to cross off the highest ones. And so if you're in that higher salary range, you might get cut. And that means that it doesn't matter how long you've worked there. Okay, so this is one reason why it's extremely important that you remember your relationship to the company. They're not your mommy and your daddy. They're your business partner, you could call it. Okay, now your start time and your end time and your breaks. Your start time and your end time, make sure you know exactly what they are. Okay, there are some fields where you are expected to stay late. That's fine as long as that's understood in advance. If you have any questions about that, talk to your supervisor about what your start time and your end time is. And never, ever, ever work without being on the clock. So I know someone who used to do that a lot, used to sacrifice time. I've done that too in my earlier years for sure, and I learned my lesson. But I know someone who used to sacrifice their break time. And I calculated the months of the hours worked and the breaks entitled, and it was about 14 hours a month. Now, 14 hours is a lot of time to give away for free. I'm not saying don't volunteer in places, but 14 hours is pretty substantial. So if you have a habit of working through your breaks, add up the time that if you had been paid for that you would have received over the course of a month. Are you comfortable with that number? Are you comfortable with volunteering your services at a company that can afford to pay you? So you just think about that. That's your own choice. But I will say it's not a good idea to start bad habits, and sometimes your managers are no stranger to asking you to stay late but punch out, or to or to come in a little early but don't swipe in yet. And here's how you handle that. You can simply say, my start time is 8 o'clock, for example. If you start at 8 and they ask you, can you get here at 7:30 but just don't swipe in until 8? Well, my start time is 8 o'clock. That's the time I start getting paid. Would you like me to swipe in at 7:30 instead? Okay, make sure you put swipe in. Make sure it's clear. Like, don't play these games. Don't don't do that to yourself. Okay, no one is going to um, no one is going to kind of advertise these verbal things. People tell you all kinds of things verbally, but how much are they willing to commit to in writing? So in other words, if your company is asking you to do something that is illegal, which is working off the clock when that's not your agreement, and not getting paid for that time, ask them to send you an email stating that. And it won't happen. It's not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is because they're not stupid. They will tell you to do things verbally, but they ain't going to put that in writing. They ain't going to do it. Because it's illegal, it will incriminate them and they can get fired for that. So, but people will always tell you things verbally, and your bosses will tell you things verbally. This is why you need to be very clear about your boundaries. Okay? Breaks. That's a huge one. If you don't know what you are entitled to for your breaks, be very clear about that from day one. Ask about breaks on the interview. How do you guys handle breaks? For me personally, I've always been extremely flexible to meet whatever needs people need. However, I don't work for free, so my breaks are going to be, whatever is the agreed upon um, situation. And for me, I know what that is for the state of New Jersey. I don't know if breaks vary by state, but I know what it is for the state of New Jersey. So let me give you an example. If you're entitled to two 15-minute breaks and a half an hour break, take your two 15 minutes and a half an hour break. Taking your breaks is extremely important to balancing your workday. Your body is energy, and you're expending that energy throughout the course of the day. You don't want to abuse your body or your energy. And I know that people get caught up in working, and you think, oh, I'm going to be a good worker if I keep working, and you're going to be a better worker if you take your breaks, because you're going to have more energy, you're going to have more focus. And you do not take your breaks at your desk. You get up, you walk away, you change the scenery. You walk around for 15 minutes, you go have a snack, whatever it is. Change the scenery to have your breaks. Take your full break and do not work through your break. In the state of New Jersey, it has become an issue for employers to ask their employees or give their employees work during their break time or not allow them to take their breaks. And periodically people complain and they get in a little trouble, and then they, revise the time clocks and things like that. But just get to know your state law when it comes to your Department of Labor. And you can just easily look up the Department of Labor in your state or call them. I would look up the website because it's hard to, it's fully comprehensive, and it's very difficult to get a hold of someone at the Department of Labor via telephone. So, but check out the rules and regulations on the internet so that you understand what the law is, because everybody's not really trying to follow it, and people will operate based on what's in their best interest. But as this business relationship goes, you need to operate on what's in your best interest. You will have fewer sick call-outs and more energy to be present and attentive at work if you take your breaks. Now, how you decide to structure your two 15-minute breaks and a half an hour break or whatever you have in your state is entirely up to you. So flexibility could be I take a 15-minute break and a 45-minute lunch, or I take two 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch, or I take no breaks and a 1-hour lunch. However you decide to work that out with your employer is up to you, but make sure you take whatever that time is and you don't allow them to bully you out of it. And that means that if you don't get your breaks for one day, you mention that to your employer and say, I didn't get my break. Can you pay me for that? Make sure you get paid. And, your two 15-minute breaks are off the clock. So you don't use them, you lose them. But when it comes to your lunch break, you should be paid for that time at minimum. So boundaries are important when it comes to taking your breaks. It's your body, it's your health, and you want to keep it in pristine shape. The next issue I've seen in the workplace is how to balance your friends and your workmates while you're working. Of course, we make friends naturally when we go to work, and we might meet with these people off the clock. We'll go out with them, We'll go over their homes. We'll even work with them, babysit with them, and do activities together. They have become our friend. If you ever take an employee survey, you will find that one of the questions asks you, do you have a friend at work? And the reason they want to know that is because if you have friends at work, you are more likely to stay. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But make sure that while you are working, if you're working in a department with your friends, you don't allow them to pressure you into doing things that you would not normally do if you were not friends. That means working off the clock, and also staying for extra hours when you're tired and you would like to go home. Some of the things that I've seen happen in the workplace with friends is they'll call each other in, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's kind of a cool thing. But the obligation that some people feel to either work for free or to pick up extra hours or work extra hours and make themselves exhausted, or when it's time to leave, their friends make them feel, oh, but it's so busy, I'm backed up. And okay, if you're backed up, reach out to the supervisor. Your supervisor can always hire more people. They can always hire temporary workers while they're waiting to hire more people. I'm going to tell you a little secret. It's not uncommon that people see that employers will try to see how much they can get away with when it comes to short staffing. They want to see how hard are you willing to work for this company so that they don't have to pay for extra staff. If you're willing to kill yourself, they don't care. It's your body. That's your health. It ain't their health. They're going home. You're the one killing yourself and making each other feel guilty about things. Don't forget, this is a business. This means they have funds allocated, if they choose to use it, for additional staffing and or temporary staffing when there's no staff. Often they just choose not to. They want to see how long can we go without hiring people because it's more money in their pocket. So you just want to be aware of that and how you can structurize your day. Let's say, for example, if you're working in an environment that's short-staffed, I would not kill myself. I mean, I've been there too. I would not kill myself. I'm a hard worker anyway, so I always do my best. But I'm not going to kill myself. I'm not going to not go on my break, not go to the bathroom. Like, think about it. That's crazy. People have held it for hours, not being able to go to the bathroom because their managers will not relieve them. So, you know what I mean? Use a sound mind. This is a business. This is not your home. Your bosses and all, the owner of the organization, they're not your friends, or they wouldn't let you go an hour or more without going to the bathroom. Okay? So just use a sound mind. Go to the bathroom when you need to go. Pretend like you're fully staffed. And operate, and I'm assuming you're a hard worker. I'm assuming you're not someone that's just going to sit around and do nothing. I'm assuming you're going to do at least your due diligence in terms of, your job responsibilities. So as long as that's the case, take your breaks. Take all of your breaks. I mean, if you ever work through a break, that should be few and far between. And you should make sure that you get paid for your break. Period. You should never bend on that. Because the moment you begin to bend on that, the moment they begin to expect it, then they expect it, and next thing you know, you're not getting paid for your breaks. So don't even go down that road. Maintain your boundaries, please. Do not let your friends guilt you into staying late when it's time for you to leave. If you want to stay late on the clock, knock yourself out. But if you find that you're doing this on a regular basis and it's impacting your schedule because your friends at work are trying to make you feel guilty for leaving at your assigned time, implement some boundaries. I'm really sorry. Please do not take this personally, but I have to go. I put in a full 8, 10, 12, whatever you work. I put in my full shift, and I wish they would hire people. I wish they were staffed. Why don't you send an email to the manager and let them know we are, again, short-staffed? That doesn't mean I'm going to run around with like a chicken without a head. Just do your normal work. Why expend more energy because people don't want to hire other staff? That's really, I'll be honest with you, that's what they're waiting to see. They're waiting to see if you're going to kill yourself trying to do the work of three people, not take breaks, do whatever you need to do. It's not your business. If this was your business, I guess you gotta do what you gotta do. It's not your business. There's someone else's name outside that building, and it is not yours. So make sure that you understand your role in the organization. That means if you're an hourly employee, don't accept calls when you're not on the clock. People have a question or what have you, email me. Do not accept phone calls. Now there are some jobs where if you leave, you may have messed up. For me, I've always done my due diligence to never do that. Any questions, I would make sure that everyone is copied on certain things to minimize any of that. And I did very well with that. But you're not salaried. And sometimes these phone calls can go on for 15, 20 minutes and all. No. Do you need me to come in and swipe in? Otherwise, the next time I return to work is when we can have this conversation. You don't want to behave like a salaried employee when you're an hourly employee. That's a bad idea, because now you're working all kinds of extra hours and extra energy, and you're not even salaried employee to even make any sense of that, which means your salary rate is usually lower, and there's just nothing about that that makes any sense. Stay in your lane. If they hired you for an hourly position, work an hourly position. Have a start time, have an end time. If you need to stay late on the clock, knock yourself out. But don't do free work, and don't allow friends in the workplace to pressure you into doing things that you wouldn't normally do if you were not friends. Okay, and lastly, I'm just going to throw this out there. Read your manual. Your employer will give you an employee handbook manual to read. And I know that most people don't read it because I read mine. And because I read mine, I understand what's expected of me. And not only that, there are usually a lot of benefits within that employee handbook that employees are just not even aware of. They're not aware of how many benefits your company might offer you. For example, your company might offer you a concierge service that you don't know anything about. They might offer you, I'm just mentioning things that I've availed myself of in the past, a personal assistant service where you can actually call people and they can run errands for you for free because it's billed to the company, or do research work and price checks and all kinds of things. I used to call them all the time, for free because it's a benefit through the company. How your deductions work with your medical and your other deductions, like if you decide to invest your money in an IRA of some sort. Those details are all found within your manual. It's just like this wealth of information. And, oftentimes people say, well, no one told me. It's not that no one told you because they handed you a book. It's that you didn't take the time to read it. And then they get upset when other people are doing things that they've been working there for 5-10 years and they don't know anything about it. It's not a secret. It's just you didn't take the time to invest in yourself. Read your employee handbook. It's not that boring. Most of it is extremely useful information. You want to take an interest in you as an entity and a business partner working with this organization, and you can find out how to handle problems also. Sometimes people go to their boss with an issue and the boss doesn't resolve it, or sometimes your boss is bullying you and they're just like, oh well, my boss is just doing this. The end. It's not the end. You have rights and options, but you wouldn't know because you have never read your manual. So read your manual. There's a wealth of information in there. There's all kinds of benefits. There's all kinds of things you can avail yourself of that you would want. Discounts, There's all kinds of things in there, but you would never know if you don't read it. So just take the time. I know a lot of people probably won't read it, but I'm just going to put that out there. It will definitely increase your value as an individual, because you will know a lot of things that people will not know, and it will make you feel like you have more control over your role in that company. So, definitely going to break this video up into a couple different segments. But yeah, so working in the workplace, it can be a little tricky, um, but I will say if you have clear boundaries and you stick to them, and flexibility is great, don't get me wrong, but make sure you're paid for your flexibility time. But if you have clear cut boundaries and you don't bend on them, you will have a much happier and rewarding work experience. Okay? If you have any question, just leave a comment and I will respond. Have a good day.